W650, W800 valve shim replacements. In this video, I'm going to continue from where I left off in my last video about how to check valve gaps. In this video, this is going to be a little bit longer and a little bit more complex. So please follow this video slowly at your pace. And if you have any questions, please ask in the comments. I will be happy to explain everything if something's not clear. Now, before we go any further and to the actual video, I wanted to show you how to open these parts on the Kawasaki. Some people use screwdrivers. Now these parts are obviously for rotating the crankshaft manually. So you need that in order to find the top dead center here in this part here, and this part you need to open if you need to rotate the crankshaft, like I said. So different people use different tools. Please don't use screwdrivers for this. There's a special tool that you can buy to do this. I forgot the name of it, but you can either use a coin and pliers, or I used a bracket. You know, just do this and open it. This bracket came from here, essentially. That's the bracket that holds the air boxes, right? And I can use this hardened part to tighten this and unscrew it. Also be careful. There is some dust and some crud behind here, so you must clean it carefully so that the sand doesn't go inside the engine. So when you open this, just take the O-ring out, make sure it's alive, and clean nicely this area so that it has no sand, and then put the O-ring back when you're done. The thing is that if you don't clean this, you'll have leaks out of here, and I had leaks before. So take care of that O-ring and make sure to clean the O-ring's seat. All right, so without further ado, enjoy the video. Again, this is the second cylinder. So when you rotate the engine for counterclockwise, make sure that when you see that mark, the T mark or the line mark over in this window, you have to make sure that the lobes are pointing away from these hands, right? That are on top, right? See, the lobe is away from it, and this lobe is pointing down. See, over there is pointing down, and this one's pointing down. So that's where you want to be. This is the top dead center, right? So that's the kind of condition you want to be in. Because there is another, like if you rotate one circle and you reach the line in this window, sometimes the lobes are not pointing away from these hands. Okay, so make sure you get to a point where it's top dead center and the lobes are pointing away, like that. See, that's the lobe and that's the hand. That's how you measure it, right? So be careful. In any case, the full explanation how to do this is in the service manual. So please don't forget, you have to read the service manual and follow the guide there. So again, exhaust valves, the clearances are between 0.14 and 0.19 of a millimeter. And the intake should be between 0.08 to 0.13. Now, before you go any further, take a piece of paper and a pencil and draw the position of the valves for both cylinders. So cylinder 1, cylinder 2, and you put because there's two valves, two exhaust valves and two intake valves for each cylinder, right? So I put exhaust, intake, right? So I take, those are the valves, right? Those dots are the valves. And then for every valve, you are going to, you're going to use this tool right? To check how much space there is between the shim and the leg of the valve, the pusher of the valve. So you're going to write these numbers down, right, for each valve. So for example, I'm starting from cylinder 2, this one here. So first of all, the clearances for the exhaust valves are 0.15 to 0.19 of a millimeter, right? So to check if, let's say, the exhaust clearance is too big, you take, for example, you take number 20. This one is 20, right? And see, if 20 fits here, in there, if 20 fits, and you can slide it in easily, see, like this one doesn't fit. See, it doesn't fit here. If it would fit, it means it's too loose, right? So let's see here. Yeah, it doesn't fit. And then you go in here in second valve, right? And you kind of try it and see, no, it doesn't fit. No, so it must be smaller, right? If it's smaller clearance, that's good. That's a good sign. So you just pick a smaller tool, right? So let's say this is 15, right? So 15, let's take 15, let's see. And you go in and you go 15. Oh, 15 is easily going in and out. Good. So it's between 15 and 19. So great. See, 15 goes in. So here, let's see here. Is 18 going to fit? No, 18 is not fitting. Okay, so it's basically, it's around, so it's less. So it's probably a 17 here. So let's see here. Let's remove the 003 and put 002, right? So 15 and here we go. So that's 17. Okay, so let's try 17. This is the real 17. No, 17 doesn't fit. We know it's 16. Yeah, it's 16. Okay, great. So that's how we know. So we know that if 17 doesn't fit, but 15 fits pretty well, it means that it's somewhere between. So we put 16 here and 16 here. And you continue going, you know, for the same cylinder, now you do exhaust. So remember, exhaust clearance is 0.08 to 0.13. And you're doing the same kind of procedure for the intake valves. And then you have to rotate the engine again until you see the top dead center, so that the second cylinder will go to the top dead center, right? So then you do the same procedure for each set of valves, exhaust and intake, for the second cylinder, for the other cylinder, right? And you write them all down. After measuring all of the valves, I found that cylinder number one intake valve should be maximum 13.13, but it was 0.14. So all the other valves are actually within spec except this one. So I need to replace the shim just for this one. So what do? Well, you have to remove the shim first. So what you do is you use a magnet, just like that, because if the shim falls somewhere in there, you know, it's very hard to get. So use a magnet. So how do you get to it? How do you get to the shim? What you have to do actually is these things, these fingers here are movable. So see, I can push and it moves. See, it goes back and forth. But notice that if I move it, it doesn't go all the way. Sometimes you have to actually move this one. See, when I move this one, look at what happened there. See, it kind of bangs against the other one. So sometimes you need to move them both. Like you move this one a little bit that way. And then you use this one with two hands, right? You move this one away. and then you move this one a little bit further so that you can get the shim, right? So in this case, I already took out the shim. It looks like this. It used to be in that hole. See that? So I took out the shim, and now we have to figure out how wide, how thick is this shim. And we need to find another shim that's going to be, basically it's going to give us a couple of hundredths of a millimeter smaller, thinner. Okay, so we will have to, what usually people do is they take out, they take out the shim that is somewhere here or here and here, and they measure, and they see if they can basically take one of the shims that are already in place here and just swap them, right? So you need to do some shim math, and here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to show you how to do the shim math. Now, to simplify the procedure, there is a table inside the service manual that will immediately tell you, you basically you provide the shim thickness, right? And according to that table, it will give you what kind of shim thickness you need in order to be in spec. Okay, so you can either use that table or do a simple shim mathematics. Okay, so what we need to do now is we need to measure how thick is that shim. And to do that, we use a micrometer. So I bought an inexpensive micrometer, 0.0 to 25 millimeter, or basically with 0.1 millimeter measurements, steps, I would say. So that's enough. That's all you need to do, because we calculate our shims in like 1/100th of the millimeter. So that's perfect. You don't need to have super fancy micrometer for this. All right, I went ahead and measured the current shim that I took out from this valve, and the current shim thickness is 3 millimeters even. All right, so at this point, I redrew our map of shims, and I put better explanations, and I wrote it with my pen instead of pencil, so it's clear for you guys to see. I also provided the formula for how to calculate the needed shim thickness, providing that you know the current shim thickness and the offset, current offset, and the needed offset. Okay, so before I go here, I want to introduce you to the easy way out. So the easy way out is, in your service manual, is this table here. The table is very clear. Make sure that it says valve clearance adjustment chart for inlet valve, right? Because you have another table in service manual if you happen to have an exhaust valve, right? There is a separate chart for exhaust valves, right? So you need, in my case, it is the inlet valve, right? So I use the inlet chart from the service manual, right? You have also a clear description and directions how to use this chart. But very, very briefly, let's say I found, just like before, that this shim, the current shim, is 3 millimeter thickness, right? So we go and we look at the table, say present shim. In this case, it's 3, right? So in our case, it's 3. This is our present situation, right? And we also measured that the gap is 0.14. So on this side, you see 0.14. And what you need to do is you just find where you are here in the middle between this point and this point. So 0.14 to 0.18. In this case, our measurement was 0.14. right? And it gives us that you need 305. The shim thickness is 305. That's all. So using this table, you don't need to know anything about what I'm about to show you. And this is more advanced. This is the logic behind how these tables are created, right? If you want to, if you don't want to know anything about the shim math, you can stop watching right now and get the required shim 305 in our case, right? And then put it back into this valve and call it a day, right? Reassemble the bike, you're done. If you want to know what's the logic behind it and how this whole thing is calculated, stay put, and I'll explain. So the basic idea here is that you need to, that currently it's 0.14, right? It's 1/100th of a millimeter more than the upper required allowable range, right? 0.13 is allowed, but we have 0.14. So we also know that this current shim is 3 millimeter even, okay? So the goal is you need to find out what shim thickness you need to drop this to an acceptable level, right? So in this case, since the gap between the valve guide and the shim is a little bit too big, right? It's 0.14. So we need to lower it down. So how do we lower it down? We install a slightly thicker shim, right? So what happens is it was like this, and a thicker shim would narrow it down to this. Okay, so that's the basic principle. We want a thicker shim to narrow the gap. So how do you do it? So basically, the basic formula I just came up with this is the current shim plus the delta gap. So what the delta gap is basically the current gap minus the needed gap. As an example, the current shim is 3 millimeter plus the delta gap is calculated as 0.14, that's the current gap, right? Minus what the gap that we really want to be at the best situation, right? Which is somewhere between 0.8. So let's put 0.8, right? So 3 plus the difference here, the delta gap, will give you that the shim that we really need to be at 0.08 is 3.06 millimeters shim thickness. That's it. That's all you have to do. Now, this kind of calculation is basically how this table is assembled. The caveat is the shim thicknesses are going in 0.5 millimeter steps, right? So it is unlikely that you can find a 3.06 millimeter shim. You most likely will get 3.05 millimeter shim or 3.1 millimeter shim, right? So 3.1 is too big. We don't need that thick, right? It looks like 3.05 is the optimal thickness. And lo and behold, this is exactly what this table told us to do, right? We currently have 3, right? 3 millimeters, and then we need 305. So basically, a 305, if you buy a 305 shim, the gap will be 0.09 millimeter, which is perfect. It falls right in between 0.8 and 13. That's all. That's how the logic works. Now, a word about how do you get these shims. I mean, if you buy it outright, you can expect to pay around $15, $18, $20 a shim in Canada anyway. But the smartest way to go about this is if some dealerships and some bike shops allow you to exchange shims. So one person, because shims never wear out. These shims, they rarely wear out. So what people do is, let's say some other person, they have an older bike, so they bring this 3.05 shim and exchange it for 3.1 shim, for example, and they leave the 3.05 at the shop. Then you come in and say, hey, I have a 3mm shim and I need 3.05, and you leave your 3mm shim and take 3.05 from the previous owner. And there's a little fee for this. I think it's $5 or whatever, small fee. So it's instead of buying full shim kits that can cost quite a bit of money, if you're buying them in Canada anyway, you can just sign up for this kind of shim replacement program. So you just need to call around dealerships and shops and ask them about this shim exchange. Another way of doing this, and what I did, is I actually went to AliExpress and I bought, for $12, I bought like 5 shims, 2.95, I think, 2.9 to like 3 point whatever, full range of them, right? So you can do that. You can just prepay for 10 or 5 shims in a row and call it a day. Now the problem with that, potential problem with that, is, do you trust Chinese made shims? Well, most of the time, the products that I got on AliExpress are like 50-50. So for $12, I'm willing to take the risk. So what I'll do, I'll install the shim, and then after 6,000 kilometers, I'll just measure it again, and just to make sure. But shim is so simple. It's just a piece of metal. I don't think anything can be wrong. So I'll take that chance. For $12, I bought 5 shims. So that's all you need to know. Please write in, and you put the shim, the new shim 305, back in the bike. You close everything as it was before, and you're done. Okay. If you have any questions, comments, please put the comments. If you like this video, please put the thumbs up. I really appreciate it.